In a quiet village nestled between ancient mountains, there lived an old man known as the Lantern Keeper. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks and twilight cloaked the valley in shadows, he would venture out with a bundle of oil and flint, lighting the lanterns along the winding path that stretched to the temple at the mountain's summit. The villagers knew him only as the stooped figure who shuffled out at dusk, his silhouette merging with the encroaching darkness. A ghost of motion barely noticed against the grandeur of the landscape. The path was steep and treacherous, with jagged rocks and sudden drops hidden in its folds. For those who dared climb it, the Lantern Keeper's glowing beacons were the difference between peril and safety. And yet, no one ever stopped to acknowledge the man whose steady hands kindled those lights. Pilgrims only noticed the golden glow ahead, never the weathered figure who brought each flame to life. Still, the Lantern Keeper persisted night after night, for as long as anyone could remember. His hands trembled now with age, and his knees ached with every ascent. Yet, he carried out his quiet task with unwavering devotion. To him, the lanterns were much more than scattered points of light. They were threads stitching the ordinary world to the divine, guides for every soul in search of hope. One evening, as the Lantern Keeper readied his lanterns, a young traveler arrived in the village. His face was marked by exhaustion, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a weathered pack. The boy paused, watching as the old man knelt beside the first lantern along the path, cradling the wick as though it was something fragile and sacred.
Why do you do this every night? No one thanks you. No one even stops to notice.
The Lantern Keeper turned his face toward the boy, his expression serene despite the weathered lines and deep shadows of age. The firelight flickered in his eyes, reflecting something neither bright nor dim, but steady, like the glow of the lanterns themselves.
"Because the light is not for me," the old man replied simply. "It is for those who need it."
The traveler frowned, trying to reconcile the man's answer.
But don't you ever feel invisible? He asked after a while. Doesn't it hurt to go unseen?
The Lantern Keeper chuckled softly, the sound more like a sigh that curled into the evening air.
"There are two kinds of souls in this world," he said. "Those who seek the light and those who carry it. I have chosen to carry it."
The boy was quiet after that, unsure if he understood, but strangely moved by the old man's words. The traveler stayed with the Lantern Keeper in the following days, watching him move through his lonely routine with tireless care. The man seemed unshaken by the passing hours, his focus resolute, as though he were answering not a village, but a higher call. Then came a storm, a wild, furious squall that descended upon the valley with the wrath of 1,000 fierce winds. The mountains echoed with its roars, and rain lashed against the earth in torrents. The darkened skies swallowed the village, and the lantern's flames, fragile against the might of the storm, were snuffed out one by one. The path to the temple vanished into blackness, becoming little more than a jagged threat to any soul who dared tread its uncertain way. The Lantern Keeper sat in his small home, oil and flint placed neatly on his table as the storm battered his walls. He stared at the quiet tools in front of him, feeling the weight of his frail body and the sudden vastness of the raging world beyond his door. Was this the moment he finally yielded? Perhaps the travelers would wait until the storm passed, he told himself. Surely no one would risk the climb tonight. But before he could finish the thought, an urgent knock cracked through the sound of the pounding rain. The Lantern Keeper rose slowly, opening the door to reveal a woman drenched to the bone, her hair clinging to her tear-streaked face. In her arms, she held a child, limp and pale, his breaths fleeting.
"Please, my daughter is gravely ill. The healer is at the temple, but I can't find the path in this darkness. We are lost without the light."
Without another word, the Lantern Keeper reached for his oil and flint. His body protested as he straightened, but his mind remained firm. The flames would return as they always did, no matter the storm. The path was slick and treacherous, the mud threatening to pull him down with each step. The wind howled like a beast, extinguishing each flame barely moments after it danced to life. But the old man's hands remained steady, defying the storm with every strike of flint and whisper of oil. It wasn't the strength of his body that carried him forward, but the quiet resolve that burned brighter than the lanterns themselves. The flames would return, as they always did, no matter the storm. With the woman clinging behind him, he stepped out into the merciless rain, his lantern held high. One by one, the flames returned, flickering against the dark curtain of the storm. The lantern keeper guided the woman and her child with every step, his movements precise as though the path had etched itself into the memory of his bones. It was more than lighting a way, it was becoming a way, an act of sheer will against chaos. By the time the last lantern's glow shimmered to life, the woman and her child were halfway up the path, the healer's sanctuary now visible ahead. The traveler who had followed the old man through most of the storm stared in awe. He had seen many acts of courage in his time wandering, but never one that carried such quiet, relentless strength. As the woman and child disappeared towards safety, he stepped closer to the old man, who was already turning back to descend the path.
You don't just light the way, you become it.
The lantern keeper smiled faintly, the lines of weariness etched deeply in his face. But he didn't answer. He simply shouldered his lantern and trudged back down the mountain, ready to light the way again tomorrow. In that faint, golden glow, scattered across the mountain's edge, the storm seemed just a little less fearsome, and like the old man himself, the light endured. Not for recognition, but for those who needed it most. The Lantern Keeper's story reminds us that true service often shines brightest in the shadows, unnoticed but vital. Those who carry the light do so not for praise, but for the quiet purpose that fuels their soul. It is in their selflessness that they illuminate paths others could never walk alone.